guess just grab it and think about it.
Good evening. Welcome to the August 8, 2016 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission. If y'all would stand with us, please. Commissioner Chip Pinion will lead us in our prayer and our pledge. Chip.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you so much for your love for us. We thank you for the opportunity to be able to come and assemble tonight together to do the county's business, Father. And we pray that you give us wisdom and knowledge and understanding that we need to be able to work through the things on our agenda tonight and to be responsible in all that we do. Father, we pray for the leaders of our nation, leaders of our state, our counties, our cities, Father, that you give all of them wisdom they need to continue to push us forward, Father. Tonight we also continue, as always, to pray for our troops throughout this world, Father, that are serving on our behalf. Father, we lift them up to you in prayer along with their families. Again, we thank you again for this opportunity tonight to come. We ask you to guide us and direct us in all that we do. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Call the roll, please, Gail.
Rhonda Allen. Jim Aberwater. Lee Bogle. Veronica Buchanan. Will Jordan. Mike Cush. Craig Lynch. Chip Pinion. Charlotte P. Mike Vaught. Jeff Phillips.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Gail. We have no minutes to approve tonight. Gail said they were too lengthy and she didn't get them all done. So it was a pass on our minutes. We have no items withdrawn or deferred, so we'll get right into business. Our new business, item 6A1, rezoning requests that are scheduled for a public hearing. Charles Mullins, the item number is 16-A014, located at 3711 Old Woodbury Highway, Commission District 4. The County Commissioner is Robert P. Size of the site is approximately a half acre. Tax map is 104. Existing zoning is RM, residential medium density. Proposed zoning is CN, commercial neighborhood. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, this property is located along Old Woodbury Pike. The applicant's proposing to rezone the property in order to construct and operate a lawnmower small engine repair shop. This activity does fall under the Consumer Repair Services activity classification, which is allowed by right in the commercial neighborhood zone. The applicant originally asked for commercial services after discussing it with staff. However, after looking at the property in more detail, the width of the property is about 86 feet, and the minimum lot width in the commercial services zone is 100 feet. So rather than recommend a zone that would create a nonconformity, we recommended the commercial neighborhood zone as the use that he was contemplating was allowed by right in either district. The commercial neighborhood zone actually has a smaller minimum width, 75 feet, as opposed to the 100 feet that you would find in the commercial services zone. Staff has spoken with the applicant regarding his plans for this property. It's unclear at this point whether there's an existing garage on the property, whether they want to use that as the proposed business, or if they would like to demolish that and possibly rebuild. And we'll see the pictures of that in a minute. And the reason that becomes important, if the existing garage is to be utilized, after really looking at this property, there are some concerns that I have about it. First of all, this property it's a single family zoned property and was used for single family purposes. The existing house on the property burned and has been removed. The garage is still existing. The garage was built as an accessory structure to the house on the property. As such, it's not built to any kind of a commercial code. So if they wanted to use the existing building, they would have to build it up to commercial codes at that point to renovate it. Also, it appears to be roughly 5-6 feet or so from the side property line. Again, as an accessory structure for residential use, that does meet the zoning criteria. If they wanted to use that for a principal structure in a commercial zone, the commercial setbacks would kick in at that point. So if they wanted to use the structure, they'd automatically have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and ask for a variance to allow them to use that particular structure. But again, we'll go to the pictures here in just a minute. There's also they have to make sure that they would need to stay outside of any drainage utility easements. The biggest concern staff has with this property really is it large enough to really do what it is that they want to do on the property? Building a new structure on the property, of course, you have to take into account where your soils area is for this property. Incidentally, it happens to be, the existing soil area happened to be on the adjacent property. They're not actually on the subject property, they're actually on the property next door. There's also buffering requirements that do need to be adhered to. This would require a type 2 buffer for this type of use, this type of zoning adjacent to residential zones. And again, staff just wonders if it's maybe a little bit too much on too small of a piece of property. So those concerns were relayed to the applicant. They did want to continue to pursue this. There's also some drainage issues on this property that I'll let Mike go into in just a little more detail on.
Doug, how wide would that buffer be, the type 2?
A type 2 buffer, the minimum, well, the average width, if you didn't use any kind of screening as far as like a solid visual screen, like a privacy fence or something like that, the width would be about 30 feet. The average width would have to be about 30 feet. If they incorporate a fence, privacy fence, a wall, something like that, a solid visual screen, they can reduce that to 15 feet. So in that sense, it's doable, but it's going to be around all three sides because it's completely surrounded by residentially zoned property.
And how wide did you say the lot is? 80?
It's about 86 feet, roughly.
So even if they do the minimal amount of setback, that's 30 feet, that gives them,
About
without
55,
taking into any
56
utility
feet.
easements or anything, that's 55, 56 feet to work
Correct.
with inside that.
Yes, sir. Now, there is commercially zoned property located kind of catty-corner to the property, as you can see on the map. Yeah, okay, my cursor's coming up. Right in here. There's an existing, let me go to there's an existing shop on the property that was rezoned, I think it was rezoned under even the ordinance prior to the 1984 ordinance we were under. It's used primarily as there's a gentleman that owns that. He kind of tinkers with cars occasionally. I wouldn't say it's a full-fledged auto repair business. He just tinkers with things occasionally, but that's what this property is zoned for. There's other commercial services zoning about a quarter of a mile to the west. You don't see it on this map. And to about a half a mile to the east, there's some other commercial zoning. You can see that there's an existing mobile home park located behind the property. Aniston Drive back here goes into a residential subdivision area back through here. But this is the commercial zoning that's closest to the property in this area. So with that, again, I'll let Mike go over a little bit more as far as the drainage issues are concerned, but staff didn't really have a recommendation on this particular application. Our biggest concern is, again, is it going to be able to fit what they want to do on the property?
I asked Doug, have you had any neighbors or any complaints or
We've only received one phone call about this, and I don't think they were really adamantly opposed to anything. They were just more curious as to what was being proposed.
We had met with the owner of the commercial services property right here, Mr. Pike. He had complained about drainage in this area. This whole area is below Woodbury Pike elevation, and there's a culvert about right in this area that crosses Woodbury Pike, but it goes to a roadside ditch that doesn't drain. It just sits there, and heavy rainfall events, water will back up sometimes into his shop and cause some problems. So when we talked to Mr. Pike, we looked at potential remedies to this, and one of the remedies was to cut a swale down this parcel here, the subject property, and get it back to a ditch that runs around the mobile home park to help drain that out. That wouldn't eliminate his drainage problems, but it would help drain this roadside ditch and lower the elevation that he experiences. So this whole area's got some drainage issues, but, and with the issues of the septic fields being next door and the landscape buffers, it's going to be tough to make all that work with the drainage and landscape buffers. So it's not impossible, but it's going to be tough.
County Commissioner Robert P.
I have not heard one way there from Mr. P, no, sir. I'll go ahead and go through the pictures. This is looking right onto the property. That's the structure in question that I've been talking about, the garage. That'd be looking to the east. That's looking at it from across the street. It's just a panoramic view. That'd be looking across the street from the subject property. Another panoramic. And that's looking back to the west.
Right, hold that just right there.
Right, this
now,
one?
This is, the culvert, I believe, comes out somewhere in this location right here, but this ditch just doesn't have a way to drain out. It's not much of a pronounced ditch, but in heavy rainfall events, just water just stands there and doesn't go anywhere.
If you'd like to take a closer look at these pictures, they're on your iPads as well. There's a PDF file we created for that, so you'll be able to go through those as well at your leisure. And staff will be happy to answer any other questions.
Quick follow-up on the water. You mentioned it a couple of times, and we don't really have a plan. So
No,
how
don't
does
have
this,
a plan.
How does this property fit into that?
Well, this property itself can probably drain back to the drainage ditch that goes around the mobile home park, but this ditch, this front roadside ditch doesn't drain, so it'll have to be addressed on their site plan to facilitate how that water's going to be taken care of. So.
Staff? Did you guys like to hear from the applicant?
Not sure if the applicant's present.
This time, we'll declare a public hearing open on item number 16-A014. Charles Mullins is the applicant here. Is the applicant here?
I don't think he's here, sir.
Anyone wishing to speak for or against or in general about this rezoning request, please come forward. Don't see anyone. I'll declare the public hearing closed.
The applicant not advised to be here or have a representative at this meeting tonight? I would take that as standard
We
policy.
usually tell all applicants they need to be at the meeting, and I've had conversations with a couple of them with the applicant on this. At least I know at least one.
Doug, if we deny it and he wants to come back, he has to pay a fee again?
Well, if
Would it be best just to defer it, that way it gives him a chance?
to give him if you want to give him an opportunity to come to try to address some of this, it'd probably be best to defer it.
I'll make a motion to defer.
I have a motion to defer and a second. Any other questions?
Just for clarification, I support the motion, but where are we deferring to? Our next night meeting, our next day meeting, or?
Really, historically, we have done it to the next night meeting.
Just for clarification is all I'm asking, so.
Next night meeting is scheduled for, let me look here. Looks like it's September the 12th. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
12th, 6 o'clock here in this room. Could we also stipulate that staff could get their answers about the use of the building and everything by that meeting?
We can
I think
certainly
we
ask
would
him.
like to. Okay. Any other questions? We have a motion and a second to defer item number 16-A014 to our September 6 o'clock meeting. All those in favor of that motion to defer, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. That's not him walking in there now, is it?
That is him.
You are late. We just heard your hearing and moved to defer it because weren't here. Josh, can we reopen it?
Make a motion to reconsider if you want to, or you can just make him come back in 30 days.
I do not have a problem with making a motion to reconsider the motion to defer.
We have a motion to reconsider our deferral and open this up for discussion. Is that okay with everyone? All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. Okay, backing up about 15 minutes, under new business rezoning requests that are scheduled for public hearings, Charles Mullins, the number is 16-A014, 3711 Old Woodbury Highway. At this time, we'll declare the public hearing open and would like to hear from the applicant. Mr. Mullins, would you please come up? If you would, state your name and address for the record. I think there are some questions that... Yes, please.
My name is Charles Mullins. I live at 3345 Bradyville Pike. The property is on Old Woodbury Highway.
Doug, would you kind of briefly run through some of the concerns that... questions?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'll be glad to. And Mr. Mullins, the information that I went over is pretty similar to the things we discussed on the phone. The first thing we talked about was the use of the property. You thought it was going to be more just lawnmower, small engine repair kind of a thing. So we recommended to go with the commercial neighborhood zoning because the commercial services zone, your property wasn't wide enough for that. So we recommended to go with the commercial neighborhood zone, if you remember.
Yes, sir.
Which was fine. We talked a little bit about that existing structure on the property and whether or not you were going to use it or just demolish and kind of rebuild. The concerns that we had from staff standpoint was the building that's existing is just a residential accessory garage at this point. That's what it was before, the house burned down.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right, so now it's just, it's accessory to nothing, but that was because the house burned. We discussed the issues that might come up with that. First of all, being that building is not built to a commercial code. It's built more to a residential code. It wasn't meant for commercial occupancy, so changes may need to be made to that. But even before that, the structure itself does not meet the setbacks for the commercial neighborhood zone. So at the very least, you would have, if you wanted to use that structure, you would have to ask for some sort of a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. And I'm not sure if this is necessarily a good candidate for a variance, but that was something we discussed. We also talked about, the parking that would be required for the property, the screening around the other property lines being commercially zoned and everything. Those were several of the things I know we discussed on the phone. And the concerns that I had, I think that I relayed to you, is this property really big enough to handle all of the improvements that are going to be required as far as the paved parking, the screening, landscaping, any possible stormwater detention, those kind of things. So those were the issues that we discussed, and those are the issues that I brought up tonight with the Planning Commission before you arrived. And Mike also had some concerns about some of the drainage in the area that he discussed briefly as well. I'll let him go over that. So I think the biggest question was, one of the bigger questions was, what are we going to do with that building? Is it going to remain? Is it going to, what your intentions were, I guess, on that. But that was kind of what the conversation was had prior to your arrival.
Just, Mr. Mullins, would you please just kind of tell us your plans and what are you looking to do, and how are you going to use that current structure that's there?
Yeah, it's going to be for like a lawnmower shop to do, you know, like you go out and work, do lawnmower, mowing and such as that, and, you know, maybe repair. And that's basically pretty much what it would be. And as far as drainage, there's out in the front, right there, there's a pipe that goes underneath Woodbury Highway that drains, you know, any water off there. And it'd just be a basic little lawnmower repair shop is what it'll be.
You're going to use that current structure? Is it-
Yes, sir. Use the current structure and bring it up to what the codes need to be.
Hours of operation?
It'd probably like from 7 to 4 or 5 in the evening.
Weekends?
Probably, yeah, maybe Saturdays. Or maybe a half a day on Saturday, something like that.
Questions?
Mr. Mullins, the planning director just said the building doesn't meet the setbacks, and he doesn't think it's a very good candidate for a variance, so that would exclude you from using this building. You know, so if this whole rezoning is centered around using that building, then it sounds like we got a problem. You know, because if you have to tear the building down and start over, a building outside the setbacks and all, I mean, I don't know what your budget is and all. I mean, you may have decided to use this piece. It looks to me that if I was you, I would have picked this piece of property just because of the building sitting there. You know, but if you have to tear the building down and start all over, that may, you know, if you can't get the variance, you can't use the building for this use. And then so, what? I don't know where we go from there. You know, I mean, we've got to make sure we just can't zone a piece of property commercially without knowing there's a plan about where we're going and things like that, so.
Well, I'm not, what is the setback? Do you have that there?
I'm pretty sure it's 15 feet. I just want to confirm that before I just state.
Doug, he can
That's
use
the side property line.
he can use the building if BZA approves it, right?
Well, if they approve the setback, yeah. The side setback is 15 feet. You got front of 30 and rear of 20 in the commercial neighborhood district.
Doug, can he apply for the variance before he applies for the
He's not,
rezone?
well, no, because right now he'd be asking for a variance for something that he doesn't have.
No, I haven't. There's a privacy fence on the right side of the property that, you know, is in between that property.
Is there a restroom in the existing building in the garage?
A restroom?
Yes.
Not at this time.
Planning director indicated that the soils for this property were off-site. Have you had any conversations about acquiring rights to the off-site soils?
Well, there's a septic system already in place.
Right, but it drains to a property that you wouldn't own, and that's my question.
Yes, yeah, it drains on that property.
So have you spoken with that neighbor?
Excuse me?
Have you spoken with that neighbor, the person who owns the soil that you're using for your septic? Have you had any conversations with them about your plans for that property?
As far as I know, it's on the property that the garage is sitting on.
Yep. Doug, you might want to.
Based on what the information we received that we were looking at, it looks like the soil area, the tank looks like it's on your property, just barely, but the soils area where it drains looks like it's on the neighbor, I guess that'd be to the west, as you're looking at the property, be on the left-hand side. So, yeah, it's not on, the soil's not on that property. It's, yeah, the system is there. I mean, it's all. There's nothing on the deed to Mr. Mullins' property that mentions any kind of an easement. Now, I haven't looked at the neighboring deed to find out if there's something. It's just one of those, it's probably been there for years and years, one of those things, it is what it is at this point.
My thinking on that,
If
Doug.
it were rezoned commercial?
Well, the system doesn't change any, as far as that goes. I don't know if that necessarily changes the situation as far as the soils area.
My thinking on that, Doug, was that even though there might be a septic system in place, it was designed for the house that burned, and I don't know if it can be reconfigured to be used for this property or not. I just know there'll be some issues related to installing a restroom into that building, so that's the reason why I brought that up.
It would probably be less useless as commercial, as far as the lawnmower shop goes, as residential, because they're not going to be there taking showers and
Right, I understand, but
washing machines.
But my question was, have you given any consideration to what's going to be required to reconfigure your septic usage for that, to add even just, a restroom facility, a basic restroom facility? That was just my question, was had you explored that, that bit of the development?
Yeah. That would just have to be looked into. I would think it would be adequate, but it just have to be looked into.
You own this piece of property, right?
Yes, I do.
You don't own the piece of property west of you there, where the septic field lines are?
No, I don't own it.
You don't. Do you know who owns that?
No, I don't know who owns it.
So you don't know whether there can be any paperwork drawn up where you have access for your field lines to be on his piece of property then, do you?
Well, it was done years ago. I mean, before I bought, I don't know anything about that.
Would there have to be something, Doug, legally saying that he has the right to use that?
In a perfect world, there should be, but a lot of these older systems that are out there were more of a kind of a handshake kind of a situation where two neighbors just said, yeah, you can use this, and deeds never mentioned anything. So, again, today we would require that, but.
And it'll work from now on. Like it is, it'll work from now on, except if somebody buys that piece of property and goes in and start putting the foundation, running.
If they don't know that there's a
corn,
septic
got a
system
subsoiler
there.
out there, then there goes his field lines.
Which is why today we would insist on seeing some sort of an easement in the deed. Like I said, it does not mention in his deed that I can see. I haven't looked at the neighbor's deed, so I'm not sure if it's in the neighbor's deed or not.
But if there's not ever any problem with the neighbor, this works fine.
Right. I mean, as far, like I said, the system, it is what it is.
It is.
At this point, right?
It is.
So you've still got a building that doesn't meet the setbacks. And
Yes.
are we, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, are we throwing the BZA under the bus to approve the rezoning of something that doesn't meet the setbacks, and then you go to them and say, well, this is a commercially zoned piece of property, the building's already there, you got to give them the setbacks and
Right.
the
Well,
variance, and I don't know,
Yeah, we ran into this situation, well, we almost ran into this situation a few months back. The application actually was pulled before it ever came before the Planning Commission, but it was a similar situation. There was a piece of property that they were looking to rezone, and they were looking to use an existing structure that was built as an agricultural structure. As such, it doesn't have to meet setbacks because it's agriculturally exempt. And I told them the same thing. If you zone the property, it's not even so much zoning the property that makes the issue come to light. It's when you start using the building in a different manner than what it's currently used at. If he decided to rezone the property, let's for sake of argument say it was, and then he decided he wanted to build a new structure and just leave the garage where it was and just leaves the garage just left it where it was and didn't use it for anything commercially, there's no issue there because it's still accessory at that point. The issue comes when he starts wanting to use it as the principal use on the property. And that would have been the situation for this other one I was referring to that was pulled before it ever came before the Planning Commission. If he wanted to continue using it agriculturally, he could have done that, but he wanted to use it for commercial purposes, and that would have, all the things we're talking about tonight, the same thing would have happened with that.
I know they're getting very upset about the different variances that's coming, and they're putting a cart before the horse. They probably won't approve it because we're getting we had several of them. There were houses, they weren't commercial properties, but I'm just saying we had a long meeting that we need to cut cut back.
Right, and, when it comes to variances, of course, it's not something you're entitled to. You have to be able to meet the standards for a variance in order to be a good candidate for one. Just looking at this, I'm not sure this necessarily meets those criteria very well. I don't know if we would recommend approval of that. And I don't think, to help answer your question even, I don't necessarily think that if you were to approve this, I don't think that mandates to the board that, hey, we want to see you approve this, because the board could just say, sorry, we're not approving this, you just need to build a new structure, and that's that. That's perfect, that's certainly within their purview, if they don't think it meets those criteria.
If we were to approve this, and we were to approve the variances, would he not have to bring the building up to commercial standards,
Yes.
have to meet current regulations as far as you mentioned parking, but would that not also include a alternate site for your soils? And
Whatever the state would
soils that on the
require for
adjacent
something like
properties,
that.
how do you get an alternate site when the soils is on an adjacent property? Without going to that neighbor and would that not have to be brought up to current regulations with the easement and things like that?
Yeah, everything would have to be built to today's standards. That would include, like you said, the parking,
And-
not just a gravel,
And if
but
this
we're
is
talking
a
paved
50,
parking.
60-year-old septic system that has no records at the health department, which a lot of them built, I don't know how old the house was that got tore down, they might not even accept this septic system.
Again, whatever the state would require. I know that there are instances where I don't want to speak for them, but I know that if somebody is maintaining that there is an existing system and it works, that there may be some leeway for things like that. They can work with applicants in that manner. But if it has to be brought up to a new standard, commercial standard, it's.
How long ago did the house burn down, or how long since there was a house on this site and since it was occupied?
Probably about 3 years ago.
Mullins, do you have an existing business located somewhere?
No, I don't. There's Bud's Tower just right a couple blocks down the street, and hardware store. And I don't see why I couldn't try for a variance on that setback.
Questions for Mr. Mullins? Mr. Mullins, we appreciate you coming and being here and answering our questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak before we declare the public hearing closed? Seeing no one, I will declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
My neighborhood or my end of the county. And I want to commend Mr. Mullins for doing this the right way, because a lot of people would have just done it anyway without coming to the Planning Commission. What bothers me is that he hasn't talked to the neighbors at all to see how they feel about it. It is a small piece of property. The other use of this land would be a house. What would be the prime use of this property?
As zoned, like you said, they could rebuild a home on the property, possibly. Whatever would be allowed by right or even special exception under the Board of Zoning Appeals procedures in the zoning ordinance, of course they could do, but under the current zoning, it would be nothing commercial unless somebody bought the property, lived there, and wanted to do like a home-based business. That would be a potential, something potential as well. But the primary use being zoned residential, that would be, like you said, that would be the primary use for the property. There's always the ability for, community assembly uses, things like that. I don't think this property is large enough to really accommodate anything like that. It's not even quite even a half acre. I think it's like 0.46, I think is what the deed said. So, as far as non-residential type uses, I think he's limited just because it's just not a very large piece of property. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't think it's likely.
Josh, what if we were to approve this and the neighbor where the alternate soil sites are, were to say, I didn't know anything about it, you know, I didn't know that it was being used for that, I don't know anything about it, and I don't give them my permission to do it, what happens then?
If there's no easements in place, and I think that goes back to the fact that it's been used in that manner for so long, and I would have to defer to Josh as far as, does the applicant at that point get some sort of right, like a prescription, easement by prescription or something like that, being that it had been used in that manner for so long? I guess for lack of a better way to say it, I mean, I don't know if grandfather is quite the right word, but like I said, it was just one of those things that's how it was developed, and just over the years, that's how it's been used. And I guess, I mean, that's probably the closest example that we would have in a zoning context. It'd be a grandfathered use, yeah. But if there's no easements to it, you know, again, that gets into legal matters I would defer to Josh about.
But even if that was, grandfather was granted, that wouldn't cover an alternate site, which current codes would require.
Only if the site were to be large enough. I mean, if it would be large enough for both the primary and the duplicate, yeah.
I don't want to get into what a judge would say, but you would think they're using a defined space, and you can't say, oh yeah, well, by the way, according to current standards, now he needs a duplicate area, and I don't see how in the world you would prescribe that to be something that was grandfathered in. So if all the soil is off the site, then I don't know. I hate not to support somebody that's trying to start a small business and be a business person in the community, but there's a lot of issues. This small piece of property to use where the building is too close to the setbacks, to the side for commercial use, it's not built to commercial standards. It's got maybe even a non-permitted septic system. We don't know and if it's got an easement or not. And I hate to not to support this applicant, but I'm going to make a motion to deny if that's appropriate at this time due to all the previous statements.
We have a motion to deny and a second. Thank you. Now, other discussion before we vote.
The only thing that I was thinking before you made your motion, Will, was that we do have this list of questions, and him being a new business owner, I would be willing to give him the opportunity to get answers to some of these questions and even defer it for 2 weeks to our next meeting so that he could determine if he wanted to pursue it or not. I mean, he's new to this process, and we do commend him for coming up here, and so that was just my thinking, was that maybe we could give him a couple weeks if he wants that.
I'll be glad to amend my motion if it's all right with the maker of the second, to be a motion to defer to the next meeting to give the applicant time to answer the questions. We've got a lot of gray area here.
So you've withdrawn your motion and withdrawn your second? With motion withdrawn and the second withdrawn, you have a motion. Could we do it for a month and bring it back to our 6 o'clock meeting? If he goes to neighbors and they may want a chance to talk, I'd like for them to have the opportunity to speak. So could we do it for next 6 o'clock meeting?
If he thinks he can get that done in 2 weeks, I think he should be given the opportunity to do it sooner. So, I mean, I don't mind doing it, 30 days out, but if he can get us these answers before the next meeting, Doug, and he brings it to you, I'm comfortable with it being on the daytime agenda.
How about we just make it just a open deferral, and we'll work with the applicant as far as getting the answers that you're asking for, and then from there we can decide it in 2 weeks if he thinks he's ready, or we could just bump it to the next meeting.
I think though that we may need to keep it at a nighttime meeting because of it being a rezoning. Is that the thing?
Like we discussed earlier, before the applicant arrived, historically, that's how you typically have handled it. Now, the Planning Commission is required to make a recommendation to the full county commission. They're not required to have a public hearing. So what we're doing here is even above and beyond what state law requires from that standpoint. So there's nothing, and Josh, certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but there's nothing from a legal standpoint that I'm aware of that will require you to have another public hearing, since you're not even required to have this one, you're just required to make a recommendation. So you've had a public hearing, you've asked for some additional information. if you wanted to, I think you could come back in 2 weeks at our day meeting and still make a recommendation at that point, and we would still have that time to advertise to the full Board of Commissioners as far as if you wanted to pursue the application at that point, depending on the outcome of that.
I'm going to make a motion that we defer until the next nighttime meeting. And in that time, we need for the applicant to confer with Mike on a drainage plan. We need him to address the offsite soils issue. It would be in his best interest, I believe, to have a plan for that building, parking, landscaping, to determine if we think it's going to function on the size lot that he has. And then also if the building's going to need to conform to any commercial use, he may need some guidance from you on that as well. So those are some really important things he needs to be able to address in the next 30 days, and he needs to speak with the neighbors, specifically the one that has the offsite soils. As part of my motion, if he can do all of that and have answers to these questions at our next daytime meeting, I am perfectly comfortable with him being on the agenda. So I would say to defer it to our next nighttime meeting or sooner if he's able to meet that.
Thank you. The public hearing, the concerns that I have is that will we go to the public, next door neighbors, and all of a sudden they have some questions and concerns. I want those questions, or we want those questions and concerns to be heard. So from that perspective, we'll hear from them. Whether it's a public hearing or not, we'll suspend the rules and hear from them, okay? Is that okay, Josh? Yes. Thank you. Any other comments or any other questions?
Did the second of that. Okay.
We have a motion and a second to defer for the second time tonight. Item number 16-A014. All those in favor of that motion to defer, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you. And Mr. Mullins, thank you for being here. And I know it wasn't easy standing before this group and answering a lot of questions that made you a little bit nervous, but thank you for being here. Item number 7 is old business. 7A submitted for site plan approval. The item number is 16-3018, Buchanan Storage, new construction of 20,750 square feet of personal services space, which are mini warehouses on 10 acres, zoned EAC, located along Miller Road. Buchanan Storage is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Commissioners, on your iPads, you'll have a copy of the latest and greatest site plan. You'll recall at our last day meeting, this was deferred. There were a number of issues that did need to be addressed for this particular site plan. For the most part, from a planning, at least from a planning standpoint, most of the comments that we asked for them to address, they have done. There is still, we talked with the applicant prior to the meeting. He is present. We discussed with him the fact that the heights of the proposed buildings are still not listed on the site plan. They do have a height listed for the apartment and office, but not so much for the other buildings, so we would like to see that. We are still working with them on their landscape plan. They are making pretty good progress on that, and I'm pretty comfortable that we'll be able to work with that, but we're still kind of going back and forth with some of the requirements for that. I'll turn it over to Mike to go over some of the comments that he has remaining on that.
Okay. Like Doug said, they've addressed a lot of our comments. They've just some additional work they need to do on this. Like they're missing a handicap detail. They're supposed to have a sediment trap in the detention pond, but we need calculations showing it's got to be sized accordingly. They're showing us a lot of trees that they're going to use for the landscape buffer, but we need to see a tree protection fencing and make sure there's no grading in that landscape buffer that they're trying to preserve. So there's just minor things that they need to fine tune, but like Doug said, they've addressed a lot of our comments, but just some fine tuning they need to do. Well,
and septic was one of the issues. We've talked with the applicant since then. The existing mobile home that's on that adjacent property, they're going to have that removed or demolished, and the state has allowed them to use that septic site, so they'll be okay with that. They also have moved the tight line. Originally, it was in their buffer area. They've moved it out of that, so that's not going to be an issue anymore. So we're comfortable with that.
Mike, most of the things that you brought up, the items that you brought up, you're comfortable with, that you can handle them at the staff level?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Right. Like a lot of this, I mean, just missing a handicap detail. I mean, just minor stuff.
Does staff have any recommendation on this at all?
I think if you just do a approval subject to staff comments, I think we can work with it from there.
Approval, subject to all the staff's comments and the
Second, to approve item number 16-3018, Buchanan Storage. Any other questions? Ready to vote? This does not require a public hearing.
Correct.
All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? The motion carries. Thank you. I think you have in front of you a copy of the Building Codes Report. Our next scheduled meeting is Monday, August 22nd, 9 a.m. in the Planning Mez. Our next public hearing meeting is at 6 p.m. on the 12th of September, right here. Doug, you have any staff?
No, sir, not at this time. Nope.
Anything else from this commission? Thank you. We're adjourned.